Welcome back to Dish and DAS Administration 1, FR100. My name is David, and I will be your instructor for this learning module. In Module 9, you will learn about identity providers and authentication. I will discuss the identity provider selections and considerations, look briefly at Basic and SAML2 authentication types, and finally, I will make sure you have a solid understanding of the user object. Let's get started. Configuration of identity providers can be added in several places within the object hierarchy. This means that where you add identity will determine in what context the configured users or groups will be able to be granted access. For example, if you add the identity provider at the customer level, then users from this provider are available for assignment to all organizations and accounts for this customer. Likewise, if you add the identity provider only at the frame account level, then users will only be available for assignment to this specific desktop pool. You can add multiple providers or even add the same provider to more than one level, depending on your needs. In this screenshot, you can see a list of currently available identity providers that can be used to authenticate users into the DAS platform. Notice the last two choices. API and Secure Anonymous Token are advanced topics not covered in this course. There are many considerations when selecting an identity provider. Most customer organizations already have an authentication solution and will likely prefer to bring this provider into their Dish and DAS configuration. Basic authentication uses an email address and password stored within the Dish and backend. The password is encrypted and can be reset. This method is not enabled for multi-factor. Dish and C3 provides single sign-on for users registered with the customer portal. It offers the ability to reset passwords and leverages a Kerberos-backed database for added security. For Google Workspace customers, authentication using Google's OAuth 2 is supported. This allows you to easily assign users from your corporate Google account. The SAML2 standard gives customers the greatest flexibility to add industry-recognized authentication providers. This allows you to bring existing password policies, multi-factor, and use custom queries to assign roles based on attributes. Examples of SAML2 include Okta, Entra ID, DOO, and Keycloak. Managing users with basic authentication is straightforward. You use the Invite Users feature to send a one-time registration link to a new user's email. A limited set of roles can be assigned to basic users. In the event a user forgets their password, an administrator can request a reset or revoke access if needed. Managing access with SAML2 allows for more fine-grained controls. Access may be granted based on conditions that match the backing directory of the identity provider. Multiple conditions may be combined to create complex or very specific queries. Once matched, a user is granted access to a role that gives them the appropriate rights to use a feature or resources within the control plane. We will dive deeper into roles in the next module. Before configuring identity providers, it is important to have a solid understanding of the user object. A user object is logically assembled by combining the customer name, identity provider name, and user's name into a unique identifier. For example, let's say I have a person named David Trainer that I want to grant access to a desktop. In my customer entity, I have configured 3 different authentication providers. I manually invited David using his email address with basic authentication. I also added Okta and Entra ID with SAML2 and expect the email address to be used for both of these as the login name. Even though the email address is the same in all 3 providers, the Dish and platform assembles each of these as a different object. Therefore, if David logs in with Basic, he is considered a totally unique user from both his Okta or Entra ID accounts. This is important to understand for 2 reasons. First, it means that in both persistent and non-persistent cases, the user count for a named user will be counted for all 3 user objects, even though it is a single person with the same email. Second, the roaming user profile for non-persistent or the volume for persistent will be uniquely mapped for each user object. So if David logs in using Okta, his desktop data will not be the same as when he logs in with Entra ID. This is typically not a desired behavior for most customer end users. That's the end of Module 9. Let's take a minute to review. You learned that Dish and DAS offers a choice of identity provider integrations, including Basic, Dish and C3, SAML2, and Google. Basic authentication allows administrators to invite users to the platform using an email address. SAML2 provides fine-grained control over authentication, using a directory service such as Okta or Entra ID. Lastly, a user object is created by combining the customer, identity provider, and username into a unique identifier that is then permitted access based on granted roles. This concludes the lesson module. Be sure to check out the other videos in the series that make up the full course. Thanks so much for watching.